Okay, here we are at 2 after. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Like I said a minute ago, my name is Aaron Organ, and I get to present today with Brett Behling. Thanks for being here, Brett. We have a few housekeeping items. There will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to please submit those in the questions box of your control panel. The presentation is available for download in the handouts box. And with that, we're gonna get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Aaron Organ. I'm here with Brett, and I wanna tell you a little bit about Brett and how awesome he is. So Brett is WSP's Rural Solutions Director from a cattle ranch in southeastern Utah. He works on projects that have a rural-urban interface, including the Central Utah Ag Industrial Park and the Master Plan for Utah Inland Port Authority. Throughout his career, Brett has been a project manager for various organizations overseeing large irrigation and construction projects. One of the biggest lessons that Brett learned early on in his career is that local farmers represent generations of knowledge that can help get projects across the finish line. So with that, thanks again, Brett, for being here. Super excited to have you.
Glad to be here. Now I get to talk about Aaron. He is the coolest guy. Aaron has a diverse aviation background with experience in general aviation, aircraft parts manufacturing, airport management, professional development, aviation instruction, and practical research. He is currently a senior consultant of aerial innovation with WSP, where he contributes to a variety of projects related to uncrewed aircraft systems and advanced air mobility integration. Aaron completed a Master's of Science in Transport Systems at Cranfield University in the United Kingdom. His research focused on how to leverage emerging aviation technologies to better serve communities. Aaron is also an active pilot and enjoys sharing his passion for aviation with his wife and 2 daughters. And with that, we will let Aaron take it from there.
Thank you so much, Brett. Before we dive in today, we're going to give you a little bit more context about where Brett and I sit within the organization here at WSP. So I do sit on the Aerial Innovation team, which is housed as part of the aviation group here in the United States. The graphic there at the bottom right, the map, that demonstrates the various airports that WSP has projects ongoing at those various airports, doing a variety of services. And then the graphic up there on the right-hand corner is the international reach of WSP Aviation Services. A little bit more about the Aerial Innovation team. We focus on advanced air mobility projects. We do drone services supporting internal and external clients and integration of advanced UAS technologies, and then really all things aerial innovation and research. So it's always an exciting time. And with that, I'm gonna let Brett share a little bit about his group. Brett, I think you're on mute, buddy.
How many times can we do this without muting ourselves? So we just reorganized. We were with the Pacific Northwest Water Group, which includes Utah, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. We've also done a ton of work with Texas as well in the past. We'll continue to do that. We take a life cycle approach to managing water resources. We get to work with all kinds of business lines to support projects to get projects across the finish line from governments and utilities, developers, industries, and corporations. We do flood control, wastewater, water supply and distribution, coastal engineering, and all kinds of services. What a cool group to be part of.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Brett. So we're going to go ahead and dive in, give you an overview of the presentation today. We're going to start out with talking a little bit about UAS history, also with a regulatory perspective in there. We'll talk about various milestones with package delivery and drones. Brett's going to talk about the key challenges that people face living in rural parts of the world. We'll talk about key innovations and what's possible with UAS cargo deliveries. And we'll wrap up today sharing a little bit about tools and services that can help overcome obstacles in this space. And as promised, we'll end with a question and answer session. So go ahead and submit your questions. With that, we're going to dive in. Really a high-level overview of some drone history. Drones started back in World War I. Various countries and their militaries developed them as target drones. So from those original target drone applications to over the decades, the military developing them into reconnaissance and combat drones, to really over the last couple decades, starting to explore how we can use small drones for various use cases, things like mapping, construction use cases, Really, there's a lot. And any cool movie you see today with an aerial image or video, it's usually shot with a drone nowadays. And today we'll be focusing on the latest with drones of package delivery. So really, the history has been scaling. The number of drones and their applications is increasing exponentially. From a regulatory perspective, a little bit of history here. Here in the United States, we have 14 CFR, or Code of Federal Regulations, Part 107, which went into law in the fall of 2016. So before 2016, there were commercial applications with drones. There was various rules, but really it was a lot of question marks of how this could expand and grow. And Part 107 really did enable some great growth. Today, we have over 375,000 commercial drones registered here in the US, and we have over 377,000 certified remote pilots. Now, the rule book, those rules and regulations of Part 107, if you're doing drone operations outside of those rules, you can get a waiver from the Federal Aviation Administration. And we're seeing that being issued for things like beyond visual line of sight operations, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Another set of rules I want to mention, because it'll come up today, is Part 135. So that's another set of rules and regulations for how airlines or air carriers get certified. And so we're seeing companies get Part 135 air carrier certification to do package delivery with drones. So now stepping into some milestones with drones and package delivery, it really started from a healthcare perspective. In April of 2019, a human kidney was transported for the first time via drone. And that was done with the University of Maryland and other stakeholders. Also in that same month of 2019, Wing Aviation, which is a subsidiary company of Google, they were the first to be certified under Part 135 that I had just mentioned. So that was a really big regulatory milestone in this space. And then in September of 2021, human lungs were delivered via drone in Canada. In January of 2022, we see drones delivering AEDs, and it ended up saving a man's life who was having a heart attack in the streets of Sweden. And then in 2023, across the globe, we saw over 1 million commercial drone deliveries, which I'll talk a little bit more about. So here we are in 2024, and we have 5 certified drone air carriers under Part 135 here in the United States. We're seeing an increase in beyond visual line of sight operations and an increase of deliveries via drone. So these graphics here, they come out of a study that McKinsey & Company did, and they're taking a look at, on the left there, commercial drone deliveries by use case. So how many package deliveries are going to grocery stores or convenience stores versus healthcare use cases? And then there on the right, they're taking a look at, of those 1 million deliveries in 2023, where were they happening in the world? So we're taking a look at that by region. Now I'm going to turn some time over to Brett to talk about some key challenges that people face in rural parts of the world.
Thanks, Aaron. One of the biggest challenges is really healthcare. When you live in remote parts of the world, sometimes access to doctors, medical supplies, blood, medications, those kind of things are really difficult to get. And there's a lack of economic opportunity. We have a struggle to preserve the rural way of life, at least in the Four Corners area where I live of the United States. Another thing that you wouldn't think about, we do have lack of refrigeration in some parts of the southern part of the state of Utah, where it makes food preservation a real challenge, and not even having clean running water is a real challenge for us too. We notice this with emergency response. It's really hard when we have a flood or we have an earthquake or we have some other natural disaster to get emergency response supplies to those because of limitations of infrastructure that's maybe blocked by some natural disaster. But usually it's just distances, mountains, large areas, the Grand Canyon, lakes. There's lots of geographic distances where line of sight is close, but you have a long drive to get anywhere.
Absolutely. And Brett, do you think this is challenges faced just here in Utah where you live or throughout the
Clearly
world?
not. Clearly not. This is a worldwide challenge, and I've traveled throughout my life and seen these kind of challenges in Australia, in Europe, other parts of the country where they do have these challenges, and I'm sure it's not unique to Utah.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about an international example. So some key innovations, I'm going to highlight some of those through Zipline, kind of as a case study. So for those that might be joining today that have never heard of Zipline, they're a company that does drone package delivery. They started in 2014, and in 2016, they launched drone delivery services in Rwanda, Africa. And this is fascinating to me as I learned about Zipline and them launching there. So in Rwanda, about 83% of the country resides in rural areas. And these rural villages were really suffering high mortality rates because they couldn't get the medical supplies they needed in time when they were needed, especially when women were giving birth to children. And so with life-saving blood for blood transfusions and things, it just couldn't make it in time. The road infrastructure in Rwanda is pretty inadequate, so it can take up to 5 hours to get from point A to point B. Many of their roads are dirt, so if it rains and it gets muddy, people are getting stuck, and it presents all sorts of different challenges. So Zipline worked very closely with the government of Rwanda, and they strategically placed facilities, warehouses that could have medical supplies on hand, fulfillment centers, if you will, and then they built out a robust drone delivery system. And by building this out, they've been able to have a very positive impact on the people's lives there. So before Zipline, working in Rwanda, blood loss was up over 30%, where 30% of the time the blood would expire or the patient would pass away before it could get to where it was needed. And now it's down to less than 1%. So again, a very positive, dramatic impact on this rural challenge. So there on the bottom right is a map of Zipline. They operate in various parts of the world. Since 2016, when they launched, they have flown almost 76 million miles, delivered almost 11 million items across 1 million deliveries. And one of the places they operate is in Utah, which is where I also reside. And so I took that picture of the Zipline drone. They call it the Zip. That's a fixed wing drone that launches off that catapult system and can autonomously deliver packages. So here in Utah, they're using it to deliver prescription medication to people's homes. So really an amazing application there. Zipline, their drone carries about 10 pounds. So I wanted to show that there are other drones, larger drones, that are also being developed for cargo delivery. So as you can see from the pictures, the various companies here, they're developing various aircraft or drones that can have payloads from 100 to 800 pounds, can fly from 300 to 1,500 miles, depending on their propulsion system, basically. So they're testing fully electric aircraft or hydrogen aircraft or hybrids. And these companies are looking at the same types of use cases across healthcare or disaster response, and then scaling that for delivering other items as well. So with this technology, Brett, I'll turn it back over to you of what's really possible, what kind of impact could happen, how can these solve some of those challenges you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, first of all, food delivery is a big deal. To get food directly from a farmer to a consumer is an exciting challenge and opportunity. We've got some healthcare delivery that's already taking place. We see advancements in that where you can have a drone deliver time-sensitive healthcare products. Even on the farm, I work on a farm and a ranch that's far from anywhere, and to get veterinary supplies in emergencies or repair parts for machinery can help a farmer get a crop up in time before a rainstorm hits. That literally translates into economic value for farmers and ranchers. Also, just getting products faster to market. We've been figuring out ways to get fresh vegetables from the farm directly to a consumer without spoilage. That's one of the biggest challenges that we have in the rural communities, is getting fresh food delivered. We also have some applications for crop and livestock monitoring. In a previous job, we had to do bison counts. We have free roaming bison herds, and we work with Fish and Game to monitor those, and we'd have to get in helicopters and go and do those counts. The drones can do that now without a pilot. The other thing that we do is applications to either monitor crops to determine the value of a crop or the health of a field, but we can also spray herbicide or other applications without having to smash down crops with tractors. We currently have a contract that's really cool with Utah Inland Port Authority, where we're looking at a statewide approach to how do we figure out logistics in Utah to get goods to and from places like the Central Utah Ag Park. The whole concept is to have value-added ag products that can be delivered directly from farmers to consumers to add value to the farmer's bottom line. The other thing we're working with is the international airport around Salt Lake City. We call it the Northwest Quadrant. We're working on air cargo infrastructure and innovation to figure out how can we even get passengers from Salt Lake International Airport to venues. That's a cool, exciting thing. And finally, Utah State University has collaborated with Utah Inland Port in the Four Corners area, that's down in San Juan County, Utah, to do an ongoing study of how we can use drones to deliver products and services to folks that don't have access to roads or refrigeration or running water in some of those areas. So exciting things going on. We see unlimited possibilities with drone and air cargo deliveries.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett. Truly an exciting time. Just a quick note on that Utah State University collaboration. I know Utah State has beyond visual line of sight waivers throughout Utah to where they can really kind of start to push the limits on that. So really a lot is possible that can really solve real challenges with this technology. We're going to go ahead and talk about some of the other challenges of how do we even integrate this technology though. We can see how drones can help solve some of these very real problems, but there are problems or challenges in and of themselves to start using the technology. So kind of high level, but here are some various operational challenges we see on various projects. You know, physical infrastructure for these aircraft to land and take off from. So vertiports, or sometimes the term drone port will be thrown out there. And if we're going to develop new physical infrastructure, where can that go? We get into land use planning and zoning ordinances, working with the local government entities for what that looks like. Aside from new physical infrastructure being built or developed, we're also looking at existing aviation infrastructure, things like airports or heliports. Can these new technologies be integrated into those? And then we start to, as we explore both of those, whether we're integrating into existing infrastructure or planning new infrastructure, the power grid usually comes up. What kind of support is there? Do we need to upgrade the power grid? Who's going to do that? Who's going to pay for it, right? It starts to unfold other challenges. And then secondary support infrastructure systems, things like weather and communication sensors. What do we already have that can be leveraged to support safe operations for drone package delivery, and what needs to be developed or added? And today, throughout this webinar, we've been discussing the cargo use case. So on point A, point B, what kind of warehouse or logistics space is needed for the processing of whatever goods they're transporting? And then regulations, I put here at the end for a reason, because regulations really goes across all of these, from a local level to a federal level. There are regulations across each and every one of these obstacles that have to be navigated, policies to be developed and implemented, things of that nature. So some of the tools and services that we provide to take those next steps and overcome those operational challenges is things like looking at the technology itself, right? Looking at these various drones or advanced air mobility, the different aircraft, the technology that supports those aircraft, and analyzing their maturity. Where are they at? When will they be certified? How are they being certified? Things of that nature. We also do an analysis across the regulatory and policy piece that I was mentioning, understanding what policy exists, what can be added to, or what needs to be developed. And then a use case analysis, because in some areas, this technology could be really impactful and positive with certain use cases. And in other areas, if you're trying to force a certain use case, it could be negatively impacting the people that live there. So we really want to understand the areas and what their needs are and the various use cases for this technology. And then we get into on land and in air, planning for how this can be used, where it should be placed, especially for those support systems. Where are we going to put that supporting infrastructure? The weather example, where should the weather sensors go? And then community engagement. This sometimes seems to be a forgotten about piece. As we're super excited about the technology and people are trying to integrate it, we can't forget the community and engaging them throughout the process to have a phased integration to positively impact people's lives as we bring in this technology. So with that, some key takeaways that we hope you have from today is understanding that drone technology and the regulatory framework, it is advancing, it is maturing. We're seeing UAS last mile and mid-mile cargo delivery really starting to mature. It'll be interesting to see what the 2024 stats are, right? We had 1 million commercial drone deliveries throughout the globe. in 2023, what will that look like for this year? And then UAS cargo deliveries have proven to really positively impact folks, like the zipline example there in Rwanda and other parts of the world, especially that healthcare use case. So how can we scale that technology to continually positively impact folks and their way of life? And so really understanding how UAS cargo delivery use cases could potentially continue to bridge that rural and urban way of life and the various stakeholders involved is what we're looking at here. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to be taking questions that have come in throughout today. A reminder, you're still welcome to add questions as we do our question and answer session using the questions box. A reminder, if you joined late, this presentation is available for download in the handouts box. And let's go ahead and take some questions. All right, so we have a question here from WSP in Canada. Thank you for joining us. They ask, what regulatory challenges exist that are impeding the expansion of UAS use? That is a great question. So really, we could spend a lot of time on this question. There's different layers of regulations, again, at a very local level here in the United States at a state level or that federal level, and the different federal agencies that are involved. But really one that stands out that I brought up today throughout the presentation, so I'll use it as an example, is that beyond visual line of sight. Under Part 107, those current rules and regulations, you have to fly your drone within line of sight of the pilot. And so that really kind of limits how you can scale this and use it. And so that's why we're really excited about the waivers that have been issued, about the Part 135 certifications that have been given. That's really allowing folks to start to scale this technology and the use cases, especially here in the United States. So yeah, hopefully that kind of answers that question a little bit. Let's take another question. Okay, this one is from Finland. How big of a roadblock is reliability and redundancy for wider UAS adoption? I can imagine falling drones out of the sky would be bad PR. Yes, indeed. If a drone were to fall out of the sky, that would be bad for PR. But really, I think, again, speaking from a United States perspective, the reliability and redundancy of these systems is there, right? They are redundant systems. There are backup systems to the primary systems. And really, we have the FAA taking a very close look. It has been a long road to certification for these aircraft, whether they're carrying cargo or going to be carrying people, as far as like electric vertical takeoff and landing air taxis. The FAA is really scrutinizing that and taking a very close look so that we don't have that, right? We want it to be safe. We want it to meet the traditional aviation safety record as we look to integrate these technologies. So, all right, moving along here. Let's see. Here in the United States, we have a question. This one's probably more for you, Brett. So, our presentation, we talked about the potential of using drones to take food or other products from farmers to consumers. But the question is, how innovative are farmers? How many farmers would actually be open to this technology? And, what would they need to do to start looking into that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I used to work for Utah Farm Bureau, and the demand for this service from farmers is really mostly the next generation. Our current farmers, the average age is in the 60s. Those guys are getting ready to retire. They're not really early adopters, but it's the next generation that is really excited. We're working on several pilot projects where we're actually delivering. We put the delivery ports on the perimeter of our urban areas, and it's been working out really well, and the demand is really, really there. And the enthusiasm with that next generation, they embrace these technologies and they see it as an opportunity to really expand their bottom line. So I don't see current farmers really embracing this, but the next generation will.
Okay, yeah, interesting take. So the kind of the second part of that question, if the second generation is coming up and they're excited about it, what kind of steps could they be taking to explore
Yeah,
the integration, right? Like if I want to start doing this for my farm, I'm a young generation farmer that's really excited about the technology. Where do I start?
yeah. So they really do have some innovative, almost mobile vertiports that have minimal infrastructure requirements that could actually be built on the farm. And so the warehouse requirements and having your launch site approved is really all it would take. There could be a coordinated approach if you want to have a bunch of farmers get together and do something on a bigger scale. But we've seen it where you can actually hook onto it with your pickup truck and actually move the launching device onto your farm. So we see this as not an overwhelming challenge for farmers to overcome. And within the next 5 years, you're going to see more and more farmers embrace this.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Brett. It's really exciting, the different innovations we're seeing in this space. Okay, let's take another question. It says, how do you envision integration into dense urban environments where space is at a premium and airspace could be more restricted? That's a great question, right? Today we kind of focus more on the rural solutions, and there's a reason with that zipline example, launching into my answer here, that zipline example is great because a lot of these drone operators did start or are going into rural areas because there is more airspace available, less restrictions from a regulatory perspective to really prove out the technology, to scale the technology. And then we're seeing them pivot and start to come into more urban areas. And our presentation here, how do we kind of bridge that so that we can have urban services going to rural areas and vice versa. But it does present more challenges. Again, across those operational challenges I outlined at a high level, you're pointing out in your question one of them, right? That airspace is more congested and space is at a premium in highly developed cities. So we really are taking a look at that. Various companies, WSP included, we use airspace simulations to understand the existing airspace and how can this be integrated into it, testing various scenarios. And we can also use simulators as a land use planning tool as well to understand where that physical infrastructure should go and how it best integrates into existing infrastructure. Um,
And
so
Aaron, can
hopefully
I
that
just
kind of,
jump in on that one?
yeah, please
That
do,
one
Brett.
is so cool because vertical farming is now one of the things that is really exciting in the world of agriculture. And so you're finding farming developed within buildings in cities, and we can put vertiports on top of buildings, which would be an amazing concept to grow food inside a building using aquaponics and other techniques, and then have food delivered from the top of that building. So the future, if they can get the regulations to allow it, is going to be really exciting in the urban areas.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great point as well. Thank you, Brett. Okay, so we are at time, but we've gotten permission to go a little bit over. Um, so let's take some other questions here. We have a question of how feasible would it be to repurpose military drones like the Predator or others to aid farmers as, say, perhaps a crop duster or other applications? Um, this would be a fascinating one, and I can maybe circle back and give more uh, a more robust answer because they're probably exploring this already. But Brett, I would be interested on your response as well. I would think that it absolutely could be repurposed, right? There's the Predator is a very large drone, very capable of high speeds, high altitude, but can also transition into lower speeds at lower altitudes, and so it could potentially be used in various civilian applications, I would think. So, Brett, do you have anything
Yeah,
to?
I'll just weigh in on that. Right now, we use drones a lot for photo imagery. You can tell by the color of the crop whether it's healthy or not. The challenge is when you're trying to apply fertilizers or other things that are heavy. And so when you have drones that can actually carry those kind of fertilizers and you're not have to constantly refuel or refill those drones, there could be some application absolutely that would save farmers time and money. So I see it in the future as a real opportunity.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's see. Here's another question about noise implications. So are we looking at noise implications for these delivery methods? Absolutely, right? This is typically kind of a number one concern of the public, right? Are these loud and noisy? Are they negatively impacting people's way of life with the noise? And we're absolutely looking at this, both on a urban perspective and a rural perspective. So again, on the rural side of things, there's less people, there's less potential for negative impacts for flying over fields and things where people are not there. But on the urban side, absolutely, we're looking at noise profiles. How can this blend into the noise profile of cities? And that ties into, again, airspace use, land use, and putting these technologies where it makes sense. Obviously, you also bring up noise profiles can be different for various aircraft. I remember when I went and visited the zipline facilities here in Utah, I was quite surprised by how quiet it actually was, until it was really, really close. And so, depending on the aircraft, their noise profiles, it really ranges. Brett, do you have anything you want to add on that one from a rural perspective, or?
I was blown away. I went some of those tours with you, Aaron, and others, and they're not as loud as you think. The other thing is they're operating at a higher altitude, so you really only hear them for a few seconds. And the research has shown that people just really get used to it. It's kind of like having a busy street behind you. After a while, it just becomes background, and people become accustomed to it. So initially, there's a reaction, but it dies down over time, and the noise is not as loud as I thought.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, so we have another question from Canada. How will recent United States legislation against major drone manufacturers affect solution options in the field? So there was some legislation last week that passed our House of Representatives. It's with the Senate, looking at basically banning Chinese made drones, which could have an impact on various use cases across different industries. But for this one in particular, as far as a cargo delivery, I think there's a lot of other options there, especially those larger cargo drones, that slide that we showed of the various companies that are really developing large lift cargo drones. Many of them are being certified in Europe. Several are US companies that are going through the FAA certification process. And so as this is kind of a maturing use case, I don't think it would have as big of an impact in this space. Brad, I don't know if you have anything to add on that one or not, but
Your team, as I met with your team, the demand for these services is so great, and there's so many manufacturers out there. The really limiting factor is vertiports and infrastructure for them to take off and land. I don't see having the limitation on manufacturers really slow it down, because right now there's more manufacturers and more drones than there are places that have preparations with land use and vertiports, ready to go.
yeah, thank you. All right, I think we have time for one last question as we come up to 9:35 here, my time. So the last question is another concern that we see with folks from the public, that community engagement side of things. So it says that they're concerned about air traffic. As this becomes more standard and the technology matures, are we looking at regulating the number of drones in certain areas as far as their timing for takeoff and landing? Um, Really what comes to mind is many of these companies, as we've met with them and worked with them on various projects, they're really aware of this and they want to be a good neighbor, right? Aviation sometimes gets a bad rap from things that have traditionally happened, but I think with this emerging technology, they're trying to, from the get-go, the design of their aircraft, minimize the impact and various things, and they want to be a good neighbor. And so hopefully, from a regulatory perspective, from my opinion, hopefully we won't have to do that, right? Hopefully, naturally, these companies will take off and land at the best times and time those appropriately. There's technologies we didn't even really launch into the, we have air traffic management, but then unmanned traffic management and those technologies and the robust communication mesh networks that are being tested and developed to handle this kind of thing. So there certainly could be regulatory pieces to that to ensure the number of takeoffs and everything is always safe. And there's technologies being developed for that. And from that community integration perspective, I think we'll have a lot of great luck with the companies as they try to be good neighbors. So Brett, do you have anything to add as we wrap up here?
No, this has been an exciting discussion. Thank you, Aaron, for letting me be a part of it. It's just been an absolute pleasure to figure out all of the cool possibilities with aviation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brett. And thank you everyone for joining us today. You can download this presentation from the handout box and our contact information is there if you want to reach out to Brett or myself. We'd be happy to continue this conversation. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.